What's up, guys? Welcome to another video. Today we're going to do a front-end mentor challenge, and it's actually going to be a challenge or a type of challenge that you guys have been commenting about, like, hey, we want to see JavaScript projects, do a JavaScript project. So today I'm going to do a JavaScript project. So we're going to do this interactive rating component challenge. So this is the design here. Let's go through it together. This is the desktop. And then the active, so when you hover over one of the ratings, so this is just like a rating component. So like, this might pop up after you've gone to like a restaurant or stayed at a hotel or something. Maybe they want you to answer a little survey or just give them a quick rating. So it says, how did we do? Please let us know how we did with your support request. Okay, so we're like a support request, so this could be like I don't know, you had some kind of problem with like a hosting account or some kind of technical thing online that you needed support with. So all feedback is appreciated to help us improve our offering. So you got 1 through 5. You hover over one of the numbers and it'll change the background and the color. And then it looks like when you click on one, you want to make it so that the user will see that it's highlighted. And then the user will click the submit button. And when you click the submit or when you hover over it again, it's going to change color. So some hover effects here. And then this click effect will be done with JavaScript. And then it looks like once they click submit, you're supposed to show a whole new window and get rid of the other one. So you're supposed to get rid of this. We'll do that with JavaScript. And then display how many they selected in a message here. And then it looks like this will all just be HTML and CSS from that point. So, yeah, not too difficult. Well, I'm sure there's going to be a little difficulty for newer people, but we're going to do this in vanilla JavaScript, guys. We're not going to use React or anything, so it'll be a good learning project if you're still new to JavaScript and just kind of seeing the thought process of how to build a little project like this. Something like this in real life, you could just build with vanilla JavaScript, but if you get into like bigger, more complicated stuff, obviously that's when you're going to want to use React or like a framework, because vanilla JavaScript is like it's more code and it's a lot more thinking, and it can be pretty challenging, to be honest. So anything bigger than this, I would probably use like a framework, to be honest. But yeah, we'll go ahead and attack this here. So even this right here, me clicking out of this is all JavaScript, guys. All this is a modal with a slide, and then this X. It's kind of similar to what we're about to build. When you click on a button, make something disappear. So that's JavaScript right there. But anyway, let's go ahead and download the files here. So I'm going to download the starter file, and that's going to be a zip. And then I'm going to also download the Figma file. So what Figma, you can download a Figma or Sketch design file, and that's just design software. What design software does is it gives you like a breakdown of the CSS that goes into each design, so you can like get it pretty pixel perfect close to the design. You don't have to use design software. You can just use the starter file that they give you, and it'll give you like a picture of it, but it's not going to be like, you're not going to be able to get everything exact. But I'll use Figma on my other screen, and then I'll just be referencing probably like the picture of the design as we go, so that you know what we're building when we're building it, okay? So I'm gonna minimize this, and I'm gonna open up Visual Studio Code. That's gonna be the text editor that I use for this project. So I encourage you to follow along with whatever text editor you're most comfortable with. And then I'm going to go into my files. I'm on Mac, so this is what my files look like. If you're on PC, hopefully you know how to access your files and your downloads. So the first one is this main.zip. So it says interactive rating component main. I'm just going to drag that out here. And I'm going to rename this file. I'll just call it rating component. Okay. And then I'm going to drag in Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to get rid of all the files and stuff that I don't want. So As you can see, we'll explore this together. It's got the design file with this is just pictures of like how to build it. So actually we'll probably reference these as we build, so we'll keep those for now. Then we have images. We have a favicon. I don't need that. That's just like the front end mentor logo. I don't want that on my website. I'm just going to move that to trash. And then we have the star icon and the illustration for the other modal that pops up when you submit your score. So it'll be, and those are in SVG format, which is fine, but it's just so SVG format creates pictures with like codes and stuff. It's a little different. But so it's the star is that one, and then the thank you message illustration is that one. So we'll keep those because we need those. I'm going to get rid of this .getIgnore. I'm going to get rid of their index HTML. I'm going to make my own. I'm going to get rid of this README template. This is just information for front-end mentor users that we don't need. And then we have a style guide here. It gives you colors and some other information, and gives you what font family we're going to be using for this, which is called Overpass. So that's a Google font, so we'll go to Google Fonts and grab that. And then it gives you colors, but I'm not really going to be using these because I'm going to be getting my colors. First of all, I don't like this HSL format for the colors. I don't use that. It uses like gradients to create colors. I don't like that personally. I like to use hex codes. So I'll be getting my colors from Figma, and then I'll be showing you what each color is for like the background and the orange and all that. So I guess I'll just keep that for now. Let's go ahead and I'll show you how to get if you're going to use Figma, I'll show you how to get the Figma file in your Figma. So go to figma.com and download Figma if you haven't already. There's a web app or a desktop app. I have the desktop app downloaded. Okay. And then once you have Figma open, either on the web or with your app, go back to your files and your downloads, and you should have your Figma download in here. And then we have this interactive writing component figma.zip. So unzip it, and then we have, and I'll show you another folder, interactive writing component.figma. Click on that, double click it, and then you want this file that says interactive writing component.fig. So it has to be a .fig file to drag it into Figma. So I'm going to drag it into my Figma, into my team. So that's my team, Nick G's team. And then I'm going to make this big, and this isn't going to be like a Figma tutorial, but I'm just going to double click to open the file. And this is what it would look like. So Figma used to be completely free to use, but it's not anymore. They recently went to like a paywall to get all the features of it. So how I told you earlier, so I'm just going to zoom in on the normal design. How I told you earlier that design software, it allows you to get all of the colors and widths and everything so that you can make the design look exactly like it should. How you do that is in Figma, at least, there's this thing called dev mode, or for short for developer mode, and you click this button right here to toggle it on. And when you do, you can click into elements, and it'll give you like the colors for stuff, the background colors and everything, and the border radius of what the border radius actually is supposed to be and all that stuff. Same thing, if I click on the button, it'll give me a color. And then it'll give me heights and widths of the button and all that. So all detailed information. Same thing, the height and width for these little circles on the buttons is 51 by 51. And the only way you can get that is by paying, I think it's like $15 a month to Figma to unlock dev mode, and you'll be able to do that. How it'll look without dev mode is this. So like you'll click into stuff, it just gives you like generic stuff. So it's not really helpful unless you have the pay mode of Figma. So anyway, that's just a quick thing about how to use Figma. If you want to go to their website and pay the $15 a month, you can have dev mode, and then you can make all your front-end mentor stuff look really close, and it'll mimic what you're doing at like a real job as a front-end developer too, because you'll be using Photoshop or some kind of design software from designers, and they'll expect you to know how to use the software and to get the design, as close to how they made it using code, right? So anyway, that's it for Figma. I'm just going to drag this off onto my other screen, and we're going to get started. All right, so now that we went over Figma a little bit and design files and all that, let's get started on building the project here. So I'm going to go into the file that we just created here on Visual Studio Code. There we go. It's pretty empty, so we're just going to get it set up. So what we'll do first is we'll make our CSS or JavaScript in our index file, and then we'll connect the font that we need for this through Google Fonts, and it's going to be, I believe, what is it? Overpass. So we'll do all that now. So I'm going to close that file, and I'm just going to put new file, and we're going to say index.html, and then we need a style.css file, and then we need a JavaScript file. I'm just going to call this script.js. And then I'm going to get my boilerplate code. So as I go, guys, in Visual Studio Code, I'm going to be using the shortcuts. So the shortcuts meaning code completion. So for Visual Studio Code, if you hit Shift, exclamation, and Tab, it gives you your HTML boilerplate code. And then we'll call this, we'll say the title of the page, we'll say, how did we do? Because that would probably be like what it would realistically say for some little component like this. So we have how did we do? And then above my title, I'm going to make a link tag, and I'm going to hit tab to finish that out. And I'm going to say style.css. I'm going to link our style sheet, and we'll make sure that it's working here. We'll say test. We'll have an H1 with test, and we'll go live. And then let me put I'm going to put my web page side by side here. All right, so let's make sure our style sheet's connected here. And I'm just going to say H1 red, or color red, I should say. All right, so that turned red, so we're good to go there. Style sheet's connected. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the default margin and padding that Google Chrome puts on by doing a CSS reset. So I'm going to say asterisk, select all. I'm going to say margin 0, padding 0, box sizing border box. Okay, so we saw that one up to the corner now. Now we don't have any default margin and padding. If you don't know what that is, I have a whole video and a whole free CSS course about all of CSS and about CSS resets specifically, so you can go check that out. Now let's do our JavaScript file. Let's create that, or let's connect it, I should say. So get rid of this H1, and I'm just going to make a script tag for our JavaScript. I'm going to say src equals, and we're going to say script.js, so that should connect our JavaScript file. And just to make sure that they're connected, I'm going to make a JavaScript alert. I'm going to say JS connected. So this alert should pop up a text box when I hit save. And it did. So JS connected, so our JavaScript is running on our page now. So that's good. So we can get rid of that. And now we need to get our Google font, the Overpass font. So I'm just going to copy this web address and paste it over here. And there we go. I'm going to make this big really quick. This is the Overpass font in Google Fonts. And I'm going to click Get Font. And I'm going to click Get Embed Code. And I'm going to embed all of this HTML up above my style sheet. So I'm going to go above my style link and below the last meta tag and embed that code. That's the code that's going to connect us to Google Fonts. When we load our page, it gives us the font. And then we need to put the font family in here. So I'm just going to put it in this asterisk that selects all the styles. This means style the whole page. And I'm just going to put that font family in here because it's the only font family that we're going to be using. So might as well just put it here. That'll work. All right, and then I'm going to go back into Google and then go down here and just copy this font family where it says Overpass Sans Serif. I'm going to Control or Command C on my keyboard. And I'm just going to paste that in here. Cool. All right, and now we're going to go back and just, let me write one more little piece of test code here. See if it comes up an overpass font. And it did, so that changed our font. So that's looking good. So we got our JavaScript and our CSS connected and our Google font connected. So now we're ready to go ahead and start our project. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into design, and I'm going to go to desktop design here, this picture. And we're going to build this. So the first thing I'll do is we'll make the background dark. Okay. So I'm going to go to my CSS, and that'll be the body. So we'll say body, and we'll say background, and it's going to be a hex code of #131418. And now we're going to make all of the code for the rating component itself. So when I say rating component, I mean we're going to we'll make like a container for this. And we'll probably just call it rating component, and then we'll do all of the HTML first. So we'll just put everything in plain HTML, and then we'll go into the CSS and we'll style everything. So get started with that. So it's going to look really ugly to start, guys, because we're not going to add CSS as we go. We're going to add all the HTML first for it, but that's okay. All right, so let's go. So I'm going to make a section to start, and I'm going to give it an ID of rating component. Oops. I'm going to hit tab, and there we go. Now I got my section with the ID of rating component. And then I'm going to make a class and we're going to call it component content. So it's going to contain all of the content in here, because I want to be able to control where it is with just one CSS selector, because you can see here that there's like some margin or padding left here and some other styles, and I just want to be able to control everything all in one go. So we're going to put another container. So I'm going to say we give this one, it'll be a div, and we'll call it component content. All right, and then within that, the first thing we need to build is this little star image, or we need to put in there. So I'll make a div with the class of star image. So I'll say dot star dash img. And then within there, we're going to do the image tag. And we're going to say ./images. And we want the icon star.svg. And then I'll just put the alt text. Let's put star icon in here for some alt text. And then we can see that when we save the page, it went up here. And then we're going to go below that. So after our star image, it looks like we have some text. So let's do the text next. We have the how did we do, and then the paragraph. So we'll do an H2. So I'm going to go below my component, my star image div, and above my component content div. And I'm going to say, we'll say H2. And we'll say, how did we do? Question mark. So you can barely see it, but our text is showing up there, so we're good. And then we have our paragraph underneath that. So I'll make a paragraph tag. And then I'm just going to copy the text over from the Figma file and paste it in here. It says, please let us know how we did with your support request. All feedback is appreciated to help us improve our offering. So all that is in there now. And then below that, we have our buttons, our rating buttons and our submit button. And how I'm going to construct that is I'm going to make that into a form. Okay, so we're going to use the form. We're going to use form tags. And then we'll treat this button as a submit button input, and then we'll treat these buttons as just buttons in the form. Okay. I'm going to go under the paragraph and I'm going to create form tags. And I'm going to hit tab to complete that. I'm going to get rid of the action because we don't need an action. Use actions in forms like when you're doing the back end. Like, so if we were to connect this form to like PHP or another backend language, that's where you use action. And that helps it connect it to the database and grab info and send it to the database and do all that. But this is just like a little front end component, so we don't need to add that action because we have no back end language that we're using. And then within there, we're going to make a unordered list, a UL, with the class of rating numbers. So say dot rating numbers. And then within our UL, we're going to have LIs. So we'll make an LI. Each one is going to have a class of rating number. So we'll say dot rating number. And then within the LI, we're going to have a button for each one, for each like number. So we'll say button. And then I'm going to give each button an ID. I'll say ID. And this is going to be the number 1. So I'll put 1-rating. And then I'm also going to give us a class of BTN so that I can style all of them with just one class. And then we're going to make the type button. And the reason that you want to put the type button on this button is because if you don't, it'll, by default, your web page will think that this is a submit button. And if it thinks every button is a submit button, it's going to keep trying to submit our form before we're ready. So we don't want that. So always, guys, if you're making a button and it's not to submit a form, it's just a button to like go to a link or do something else, make sure you put the type of button on there. And then within here, we're just going to have the number 1 because that's going to be the 1. So again, what we're building right now is these buttons. So we just built our 1. Now we're going to do 2, 3, 4, and 5. So what I can do now is just copy this whole LI with my button in it and just paste it down 4 more times. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we'll update the IDs and the content. So we'll say our second one is the ID is going to be 2 rating, the number 2. And then our third one's going to have an ID of it's going to have an ID of 3 rating with the number 3. And then we have the next one with the ID of 4 rating and the number 4. And the next one with 5 rating and the number 5. So there's all of our ugly little buttons right now since we haven't styled them yet. They're not very pretty, but we're going to make them look like the design when we add our CSS. So that's it for the buttons. Next, we're going to make we'll make an input. We'll make an input submit type for our form. That'll be this big button right here. The submit button here. We're going to create this within our form. So we're going to go below our unordered list, and I'm going to put, I'll give it a container for the button. So I'll just say dot submit container. And then I'll give it an input. And we'll say type is going to be submit because we do want this one to actually submit the form. And we'll give it an ID of submit button or submit BTN. So we'll say submit dash BTN. And then we'll give it a value. Say value, and it's just going to be, we'll say submit. I think it's in all caps. And the design. Yeah, so we'll just do that. So we have all of this done along with our buttons and the submit button now. So that's pretty much good to go. What we'll do is we'll style this up, and then right below it, we'll make the thank you component right below it until we use JavaScript and CSS to make it disappear. So let's finish one thing at a time, I guess. So what we need to do here is we need to make this have a little container with the rounded border radius corners. So let's do that. So I'm going to go into my CSS, click on that, and I'm going to make a CSS comment by hitting command / or you can do control / on PC, because I want to make it like super clear that this is the rating component styles, because we're going to have a rating component and a thank you component after it, right? So we'll say rating component styles. Just make it big. Save it. And then we're going to start styling this up. So we have an ID for a rating component called rating component. So I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to select it with the ID hashtag selector. And we're going to say background. And we're going to say hashtag 1D 2530. There we go. So it gives it like that kind of lightish blue color like we have in the design. Okay. And then we're going to give it a width and a height. So I'm going to say width 415 pixels. Let me just double check Figma for the width and height of this thing. So in Figma, the width and height of this is like it's like 415 by 415. It's 412 by 416, but so yeah, we'll do that. So we'll say width 412, height 416 pixels. And then it has a border radius. So these corners are curved. The border radius is 30 pixels all around on each corner. So we'll say border radius 30 pixels. Okay, so that gives us the curved borders. And now we have to put this thing, see how it's like, our design is like scrunched up in the corner, and we want to center it and then bring it down so it's in the center of the page a little bit. And to do that, we're going to use margin. So I'm going to say margin top and bottom 5 rem. 1 rem is equal to 16 pixels. So 5 rem is 12 times 5. So it's like 60, probably, yeah, 60 pixels top and bottom. Maybe I'm wrong. My math is really bad. And then left and right, we want it to be auto. There we go. So now that centers the component more. And then just looking at it right now, our list items have that default bullet point that we don't want on our list items, because remember we made our rating buttons list items. So let's get rid of those bullet points because that looks really ugly. So I'm just going to go up here to like, I'll call this like our global styles, and I'm going to say li list style type none. Okay, so that gets rid of that. And let's continue on. So now we're going to move on to styling the component content. So by component content, we mean our text and our buttons and everything. So let me go to style.css. And let's copy this class name of component content. And I'm going to use the dot selector for the class, component content, curly braces, and then we're going to say, we're going to give it some padding, because the content shouldn't be sucked up in the corner here. It's got padding to the left and then top and bottom, it looks like, or at least to the left and top. So let's say padding top, padding dash top 2 rem, and save. And that brings everything down. And then we'll say padding dash left 2 rem, That brings everything over, so it looks more like the design. So we got that space there, so that's good. Alright, so now that we got some padding on our component content, let's make the star image how it looks in the design. So it should be, it's got like a circle container around it with the background color, and it's in the center. So let's do that. So first we'll grab onto our star image container. And then we'll give it a background or background color, whatever, both work fine. And it's going to be hashtag 232 D39. Okay, so it's got the background, but now it's just going all the way across, which we don't want. So to get rid of it going all the way across like that, we can give it a width. So let's just say, let's see, on Figma it says that the width of this little container around it is 48 by 48 pixels. So we'll say width 48 pixels, height 48 pixels. And then we got to make it circular because now it's just square. So let's say to do that, we do border radius 50%. That's how you make circles. Okay, so we got that. And now we got to put this star in the middle. So to do that, we're just going to use, we'll use display flex to do that since our image is inside of that container. We can use the flex box. So let's do, say display flex, align items center, and justify content center. Okay. Cool. And Flexbox works in that case, guys, because remember, we have the start, this dot star image is just a little div that's around the actual image. So we can use Flexbox so that anything within here will be in the dead center of that. That's why Flexbox works. That's a really neat trick. If you ever need to center things within like a container like this, back in the day we used to use like positioning absolute, positioning relative, but nowadays you can just use Flexbox and it's a lot easier and a lot better. So we have our image. Looks pretty accurate. Liking that. So let's continue to work our way down to our H2. So that's going to be component content dot component content H2. And the color is going to be white for the text. And then the font size, let me look in Figma for that. Font size is going to be 28 pixels. Okay. And then it's got some padding on the top, so we'll say padding top maybe 2 rem. So we'll say padding top 2 rem. Okay, looks good. And then the font weight of this is 700. And then below that, we'll keep working our way down. We have the paragraph text. So we'll say component content dot component content P. Oops. Okay. And for that, we're going to say color. It's going to be hashtag 949 FAE. It's kind of like an off, like lightest kind of gray color. And the font size is going to be 15 pixels. And let's see. Give it some padding top of maybe close, looks like close to 1 rem. So let's say padding top 1 rem to start. Okay. And then it's got some line height of 24 pixels. So line height 24 pixels. So line height is just the space in between lines of text. Okay. And then we got the font weight is 400. Font weight 400. Okay. I believe that's it for that. Let me just see. Let's see where improve our offering. So, and the design to help us improve our offering is on the bottom. So we need a little padding over here. So let's maybe make, let's say padding right. 1 rem. There we go. So that brought the text and everything over a little bit like it should be, and then approve our offering text is where it should be. Okay, so that's good. And now we're going to keep working our way down, and we're going to do the rating buttons styling. So we're going to select our rating numbers list here, our little unordered list. And we'll say dot rating numbers. And we want these to go across here like the design. So we're going to say display, flex, align items, center. Okay. And then we want them to have some margin or padding on the top. So let's say padding 2.3 rem. We go. And we just want that to be on the top, not left and right. So we'll say, there we go. And then we want each individual thing. So each individual number needs to have, kind of like up here, needs to have a circle and have the number in the middle. So we'll do that. So to do that, we'll say dot rating number button. Okay. And we'll say color, say hashtag 949 FAE. And we'll say background, hashtag, we'll do the 232D39. And the width of each one is going to be 51 pixels. And the height is also going to be 51 pixels. Okay, so it's starting to take shape here. We'll say border none, because we don't want this little border on the edges here. And then we want them to be circles, so we'll say border radius 50%. Okay, so we're looking good here. We need each one of these to be pushed over to the, so where the number 1 is fine, but all these other ones have to be pushed over to the left a little bit so that it looks like our design right here. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to make it what's called a utility class. That's going to give margin left to anything that we put on it. So I'm going to go up to my global styles, and I'm going to call this class dot mLeft for margin left, and then I'm going to say margin left 2 rem, and then I'm going to add that class to all of my buttons. Okay, or to all the numbers, I should say, that I want it to be on. So I want the number 1 to stay there, but then from 2 on, I'm going to say mLeft. Okay, so see how that pushes that over. And just looking at it, looks like it's going to be too much, but we'll fix that in a second. So let me just go down here and just add it to all of the other LIs that need it. Okay, there we go. Yeah, it is too much, so that's okay. Now that we have that class on here, we can change it. So let's just say 1 rem, and that looks better. Let's look at the design. Maybe I can adjust it a little bit. Say 1.3 rem. That's better. I think that looks pretty good. We're going to keep that for now. I think that's close enough. Yeah. And then what we can do in here, just to make sure that all these numbers are centered exactly, is we can use the flex property that we used for the star to make sure that was centered. So let's say, go to our rating number button again, and we'll say display, flex, align items center, justify content center. Okay. And that'll just always make sure that these numbers are in the center. And then the font size, these numbers are looking a little small compared to the design, so let's change the font size on those. And the font size looks like 16 pixels. There's supposed to be 16 pixels for each number. There we go. Now they're a little bigger. And let's see. And the font weight is supposed to be 700, so a little bit more bold. So we'll say font weight 700. Okay, there we go. That's a little bit of boldness to each number. And that is looking good, guys. We are looking good. So, if you remember in the design, let's go to our design and go to active states. And when we hover, not when we click, but when we hover over each one, it's supposed to change the background and the color of each number. So let's implement that now while we're here. And then we'll worry about that and the other things later. So let's go to our rating number button. And let's add a transition. So we'll say transition. We'll say all 0.2 seconds and ease in. Okay. And then we'll copy this and use the hover pseudo selector to give it a little hover effect when we hover over it. We'll say, just put :hover after it. And we'll say background. And we want it to be the like an orange color. So that orange color is hashtag FC7614. And then the color of each number changes to white, which is just hashtag FFF. So let's see if that works. And there we go. Or I'm sorry, that's the hover effect for when we click on them. So the background is not supposed to be orange here. It's supposed to be hashtag 979797. There we go. There we go. So now that looks like that. This one right here. Okay. So that's pretty cool. All right, and then we need to go ahead and give each one of these. We want this. All right. So and then, guys, we need to go over here to each one of these buttons, and we need to give it. See how my cursor is still just a regular pointer? We want it to be the finger pointer, like in the design. Okay. So that finger. So for that, we're just gonna say cursor pointer. Okay. There we go. So now when we hover over each one, it's like it's basically telling you, like, the user, like, hey, this is clickable. Click it. Okay. So that's it for that one. Next, we're just going to keep going on. We're almost done with this part of the design. We're going to go to, just click on our desktop design. And we need to make this submit button here, okay? So we got to make this down here and big and orange, okay? So let's go ahead and select it by its ID. Let's say hashtag submit BTN. Make sure we got that right. I'm just going to copy paste this to make sure there's no typos. All right, and then we're going to go ahead and get to work on this. So this one's going to be a background, and this is going to have the orange background. So we'll say FC7614. And then we're going to say font size 15 pixels. Font weight 700, a little bit bolder. And then we're going to say color. We'll say white. We want the text to be white in there. And we're going to say border none. And then we're going to say border radius is 22 pixels, a little rounded. And then this button is supposed to have a width of 341 pixels. Here we go. And a height of 45 pixels. All right, there we go. And that's looking like our button now. And then let's go ahead and say margin top. And we'll say 1.5 rem. Give it some room. And that looks good. See how that looks compared to the design. Yeah, it's pretty good. Pretty dead on close there. So that is, I'm happy with that. Now let's give it its cursor pointer. Okay, so we got a pointer, and then we still have to give it a hover effect like our last one. So the background on hover, it needs to turn white, and then the text needs to turn orange. But before we do that, you'll also notice that there's what's called letter spacing in between the letters of submit. So let's add that in. So I'm gonna go here. Actually, we'll add this up with our other font stuff. Let's say letter spacing. And let me see what that is in Figma. And it looks like it's 2 pixels. So we'll say 2 pixels. Boom. There we go. And yeah. That's it for the submit button. So now let's do the same thing that we did. We can just copy paste this code, this transition. Okay. We want to transition all 0.2 seconds ease in. And then we'll say hashtag submit button hover. And we'll say background. We want that to change to white. I think, right? Yes. And then color to change to that orange color. So the text will change to the orange. All right, let's see. Hey, there it is. All right, cool. So got our styles for the main component here. Now let's go ahead, before we do the JavaScript, we've got to get the other component coded up here. So that'll be the thank you component, which is this thing. So let's code this up, and then we'll add some JavaScript in, okay? So we're just going to make this like right below this one for now. So let's go back to our index. And this is the section, this should be the closing section for the how did we do rating component right here. All right, so below that, we'll say, we'll use another section, and we'll say we want to have an ID of thank you component. We'll hit tab. And then we're going to do the same thing that we did to build this. We're going to just go right on straight down the line here. So first we have this image. We'll add all this HTML, and then we'll style it. So we'll add the thank you image first. That's what we'll call it. So we'll say dot thank you image. And then within there, we'll say, put our image tag. We'll say /images illustration thank you. Say thank you image for our alt text. So there's our thank you image that's showing up. So we're on the right track here. And then below that, I believe there's some text that we have to add in. So yes, so we have this text box and then this text. So below here, let's make a paragraph, and I'm going to give it an ID of dynamic text, because we're going to make it dynamic with JavaScript eventually. So I'm just going to give it that ID just so it's like descriptive of what it's going to be. And then within the paragraph, I'm going to write you selected, and then we're going to put a span element here with a class of dynamic number, because that number is going to come from what we select on our rating area here. So we'll say dynamic number. Okay. And we're going to leave that blank because that's going to be generated JavaScript in a second. And then we'll say after that it's out of 5. Oops. Out of 5. And then, so just to show you, so got that here. So use selected. We don't have anything here out of 5. Nothing yet because that's going to be dynamic. And now let's do the thank you and the paragraph. So let's say below the paragraph, we'll say h2 dot thank you heading. And simply says thank you, like that. Okay, so remember, we're down here. It's all showing up down here, guys, right below here. And then we have a paragraph. So we'll say P. We'll call this thank you text. And I'm just going to copy and paste this text from Figma into the P paragraph tag. And it says, we appreciate you taking the time to give a rating. If you ever need more support, don't hesitate to get in touch. So that's down there. And that's pretty much it for that component, guys. So let's start styling this up so it doesn't look so ugly. So I'm going to go to we're going to make it look like this, okay? So it's basically a lot of the styles are going to be the same. Let's go to style.css. And then let's copy our rating component styles comment here and bring it down. And we'll call this thank you component. All right. And then we'll just start styling here. So for the thank you component, I'm going to copy a lot of these styles here. So it's basically going to look identical to what we already have here. So say hashtag thank you component. Paste this in. There we go. I want this to be the same height and width and everything because when we get JavaScript, this is going to disappear and this is going to go right in its place. So I want these to look like identical sizes so that it just looks like a seamless transition. Okay. So we got that there. Let's do our thank you image. So everything in here can actually be text align center as well. So we'll say text align center because all of the text and the image and everything is centered, as you can see in the design here. Okay. So let's go down now to the thank you image. So we'll say dot thank you image. And we'll say padding top 2 rem. Give it some space there. Yeah, that's good. And then we have to style up our dynamic text here. So in here it looks like it's got a little background, the text is orange, and then there's a border radius on it. So we'll do that now. So we called that dynamic text. So we'll say, just copy this here. Copy this ID name. And we'll say hashtag dynamic text. And let's see. We'll give this a background of hashtag the 232D39. Okay. And then we'll give it the orange color for the text. And then we're going to say border radius is 30 pixels. Go. And see if this thing has like a width or something here. Going to Figma, we're going to give it a width. So the width is 144 pixels long, and how tall is this? 22 pixels tall. So I'll say height, 22 pixels. Go. And that doesn't look... Okay, so it's 168 by 32. I was looking at the wrong thing. There you go. And then we'll say display flex, align item center, justify content center. So that'll center it here. It's our little trick, remember. And now we have to, since it has a width, we're going to use margin again. So we'll say margin 1 rem auto. So 1 rem top and bottom margin, and then auto to center. And that looks pretty good. Maybe we can do like margin 1.5 rem because it looks like there's more space that's actually there. There we go. And the design. So that looks better. So we keep it like that. So see our text is jumbled up here because we don't have our dynamic text yet, but that's okay. We will fix that when we add in that dynamic text. So we could actually, yeah. So we'll leave that like that for now. Our styling looks good though. So yeah, now we'll do the thank you and the paragraph. So this is, I think we gave this one a class. Yeah, we said the thank you heading. So we'll say dot thank you heading. And color is going to be white. And the font size is going to be 28 pixels. And then we're going to say margin bottom, or we should say padding bottom 1 rem. Give it some space between that and the text. Yep. And it might even be less than that. Maybe like 0.7 rem, because it doesn't look like it's quite that much spacing between that and the design. That looks closer. Okay. Cool. And then we'll go down to the paragraph and style that now. So we'll style this paragraph. So that is thank you text. We'll say dot thank you text. And the font size is 15 pixels. Font weight 400. And the color is going to be a 949 FAE. Okay. And then let's give it some padding on the sides because the design has padding on the sides. So we'll say padding 0 rem, 2.5 rem on the sides. And let's see, does that look like it's supposed to? Might be less than that. Let's just say 2. Say 2.3. We're just adjusting this to make the text look like it should on the design. Yeah, and that's exactly what it looks like. Get in touch should be on the bottom. It's all stacked up like that. So yeah, I like that. And then we got to give it some line height, it looks like. So let me go into Figma, and the line height is 22 pixels for this text. So we will say line height 22 pixels. Okay, there we go. All right, so that's our second component. So all of our HTML and CSS is done. So now we just got to add in some JavaScript to make this dynamic. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to grab We're going to go into our JavaScript and we're going to grab onto the elements that we need from the DOM, okay? So the first thing that I'm going to grab that I know I'm going to need is this submit button here, because that's going to have a click event on it that's going to pretty much run the whole program, okay? So I'm going to say const submit button equals document dot get element by ID, and I believe just to verify that our ID is submit button and that we spell it right, I'm going to copy paste that in there. Okay. So we got our submit button, and then we're also going to need to grab each component and put that in a variable, because we have to make them appear and disappear when we need to see them. So let's just do that now. So I'll say const. First we'll do the rating component. We'll say rating component equals document dot get element by ID again. And we'll copy and paste that ID name so we don't have a typo. So we'll say rating component. Cool. And then let's just copy this because it's going to be like the same process. And this is going to be the thank you component. And we'll copy that ID in here. Thank you component ID. So let's go ahead and use the console to make sure that we have everything selected and to check our work. So let's say console.log submit. Oh, look, I already see a typo here before I even do anything. It's supposed to be submit button. So let's say submit button. And let's open up let's right click and hit inspect. And we are selecting our submit button correctly, so that's good. So let's check our rating component now. So let me just copy this down a couple times. So say console.log rating component. Okay. And our rating component is there. It is that section, so we're selecting that. And then we're going to make sure we have our thank you component selected. And we do. Cool. All right, so everything is selected correctly. So again, that's just a good habit to get into, guys. If you're going to be doing like vanilla JavaScript, like use the console and check your work before you continue on and have like a bunch of code that you don't even know if it's selected correctly. Because that's when things go wrong, and when you can get really frustrated is when stuff isn't working like it's supposed to, and it comes out that you have a typo or you're not selecting something correctly. So now let's go ahead and select all of our rating buttons, put them in a variable. So we can space these out a little bit. And we can put comments over them just to make it like really clear about what everything is doing. So this is our submit button element. And then this is our rating component element. Just copy this. And then this is our thank you component element. Okay. And thank you. I know thank you is that, but when I name stuff, I don't like to put a bunch of dashes, so I just put it like that. All right. So there, we got all those selected, and then we need to let's grab our buttons. So we'll say const rating buttons or rating BTNs equals. So I think we used classes for those. We put BTN class on here. So maybe we should put rating BTN on here to make it easier to identify with our JavaScript. Let's just change it to, because we didn't use the BTN class anywhere here. That shouldn't change any of our stylings. Yeah. And sometimes you'll see stuff like that, guys, where it's like something else. It makes sense to change the name of something so to make it your JavaScript easier to read. That's not a problem if that happens. You always wanna like make your app and then improve it as you go, right? Let's change that to rating button so that we can match the names up. I like having all my variables like named the same as my IDs in my classes, just so like it makes total and complete sense and I know exactly what does what. So say document dot query selector. So for this, instead of ID, they're all classes, so we're going to use query selector. And then there's multiple elements with that same class, so we're going to say query selector all. Okay, we're going to put parentheses and quotes, and we're going to say dot for, because it's a class and they're called rating btn. Make sure that's right. Yep. Okay. So what that does is it returns like a list of everything on the background, and I'll show you. It returns like a list of all the elements that currently have that class, the query selector all. So let's make a comment in here, and we'll say rating buttons. Let's use the console to make sure that it's giving us what we want. Console.log rating buttons, and there we go. So this is what you want to see. It says node list. There's 5, and there is 5, so that's good. It's returning the list of our list of buttons, so that's good. That's the first step to selecting all of them. What else are we going to need? So we made a span with the class of dynamic number down here. So let's go ahead and select that with the variable because we're going to need to change that as we select different things to the correct score. So let's get rid of this console.log. And we'll say, make a JavaScript comment. We'll say dynamic number. Okay. And let's say, I guess we'll call it rating score. So we'll set let rating score equals, and I think we made this a class, right? Dynamic number is a class. Yeah. So let's just copy this, and we're going to use query selector for that since it's a class. So we'll say document dot query selector. And we'll say dot dynamic number. Okay, so we got that. Let's console.log that. So console.log rating score. And there it is. It's the span of dynamic number, so we're getting that correctly. All right, what else? And then we can set let's set a variable of default score in case a user decides, we'll make like a functionality to where if they just hit submit without selecting a score, that'll give like a default score or message. So we'll say default score, and we'll just say let default score equals 0. It'll be like you scored 0 out of 5 because you didn't select anything. Okay. That's not a DOM variable. That's just something that we're setting, and we'll use it later on. Okay. So let's go ahead first, and we'll set up an event and a function for submitting the score on this button. So let's go ahead and we'll say submit button. So before I do that, let's do comments here. And these are going to be, this section is going to be where our event listeners are. So listeners. And then up here, we'll comment this section to say DOM element variables. I just like to make comments like this, guys, even when I'm coding projects by myself, so that when I go back, I know like exactly what's what. I like to label everything. So Yeah. Everybody, you'll develop your own little style of coding as you get more advanced, but this is just my style, I guess. So event listeners, let's say submit button dot add event listener. Okay. And we want to listen for a click on that button. And then we want to run a function called submit score. Okay. And our console is giving us a reference just because I haven't created any functions called submit score yet. And it's just saying like, hey, there's no function that says that to hook onto, but obviously we haven't made it yet. So now that we have our event listener attached to this button, guys, what I want to do is I want to just set up the functionality first where when we hit submit, that this disappears and then this appears. So we need to make this get off the screen first. So that's our thank you component. So let's just go to CSS, and by default, we want this to display none. I don't want it to be there, okay? It should be invisible. And then what I'll do, I'll go back to my JavaScript, and let's create this function that I named here called submit score. So let's go down here. We'll say functions. Okay, and we'll say function submit score. And we're going to go give it curly braces, and then we're going to say rating component. So this is, again, so all the code that we put in this function is going to happen after this submit button is clicked, okay? So we want the rating component, and we're going to say dot style dot display is going to be equal to none. So we're writing a little bit of CSS with JavaScript here, which is cool. And then we're going to say thank you component dot style dot display equal to block. Okay. So let's see if that works. So when I click the submit button, this should disappear, and then the other thank you message should appear. Let's see. Okay, and it is working. So check this out. Go to our console too. So right click inspect. It's working, but it's like, since this is a form that we put it in, by default the submit button, it submits it. It's supposed to submit it to the back end really quick and then return data. But we don't have a back end for this. This is kind of just like a little front end project. So what's happening is it's doing it really quick in a split second and going right back to our other screen. See that? And you can't, sometimes you can see in the console a little message will briefly appear, but that's not even, it's so fast that that's not even happening. So to get rid of that, that's called the default behavior for that button, and we want to get rid of that default behavior. So to do that, we're going to use the, that's called the event parameter. So, and for that, we're just going to put E for event, okay? And we're going to say, now that we have that E in there, now we can use this to manipulate the behavior of the button. So let's see. I'm going to say E dot prevent default. So default. And that's like a little built-in function of JavaScript that you can put on that will get rid of the default behavior stuff when you're running a function. And it's usually used in this case where you're trying to submit a button, but you're not actually submitting a form. You just want something to happen. So now when we hit submit, that e.prevent default, the default behavior isn't happening. And now we can see the other component that we're supposed to see. So it'll say you selected whatever out of 5 when we have that in there, and then thank you message, okay? So that's that. So we got that functionality working. That's like the easiest piece to get done here. So now we can move on, and we got to start adding functionality to where when we click these, it highlights orange, and then we can submit and get that text in the next screen telling us what we selected out of 5, okay? So what we need to do here is we need to add, before I write any JavaScript, I need to make a CSS class that we can add on to these when they're clicked, that will get activated when we click them, and add the class to it, so it'll style it and it'll have the orange background and the white number. So let's go to our CSS to the bottom here, or actually not to the bottom. Let's go to, we want to go into our rating component to the bottom, and we're going to create a class that we can add dynamically. So by dynamically, I mean with programming. Okay. So I'm going to add this class, and we're going to call it, see, these are rating numbers. So we can say, actually, let's put it up here above the submit button with the other rating number stuff. Let's say dot rating number, and then button, and we'll say dot active, the active class. And when it's active, meaning when we click on it, we want the color to be, so we want these, instead of this like off gray or whatever this is, it's going to become white. And then the background color is going to become an orange. All right. So we'll just say, say background. Okay. So now that we have that class there, now we can use some JavaScript to add that class dynamically when we click in here. Okay. All right, guys, so now that we got our functionality into where we submit, it'll make the rating component disappear and have our thank you message appear. What we're going to do is we're going to write some more code here. We're going to add an event listener, and we're going to make it so that our text right here updates with the actual score that we're clicking on the previous page, on this page, okay? So it's going to take whatever value is in here and then insert that as our dynamic number, okay? And before we move forward, as you can see, we're having some kind of spacing issues here with the dynamic number. So our default is 0 out of 5 that we put here. Our default score for now is just 0 out of 5, so it's doing it. But I don't know, I'm not sure why we're having spacing issues, but we're going to go ahead and fix that. So to fix that, I'm going to go and select I'm going to go below my dynamic text here, and I'm going to say dot dynamic number. All right, and then what I'm going to do when I select my dynamic numbers, I'm just going to give it padding left and right, because I can't figure out what spacing issue, there's some issue in the HTML that I cannot figure out why it's not spacing correctly. So I'm just going to do like a little hack to make my life easier here. And you'll run across this sometimes, guys. Like stupid stuff is going to happen that you can't figure out, so you just got to find a workaround. So I'm going to say padding 0 and 3 pixels left and right. And there, now that we have, it looks like we have like natural spacing here for our message. So I don't know what was causing that, but that's going to fix it. If there's no problem on your end, then go ahead and skip this part. You don't have to fix anything. All right, so let's go back to our JavaScript, and now we're going to add, like I said, we're going to add an event listener that's going to listen to all of our buttons. So all of these rating buttons. It's going to listen for a click on there, and then we're going to write a function underneath our submit score function to transfer whatever the rating is here over there. And we're also in that functionality, when we click, we're going to add our active class to give this the correct background. It's supposed to be an orange background and white text when these are selected, okay? So, all right, so we're going to go below our submit button event listener here, and we're going to write some fancy code. We're going to use this click event listener again, but we're going to write some code above it called a for each loop. And what that's going to do is it's going to let us select and add a click event to every one of the buttons here, because we can't just, like the default click add event listener is only going to add a click to one event, to one element, but we have 5 elements that we need to have this click event trigger on, so we have to write what's called a for each loop, okay? So it's just a loop. What loops do in JavaScript is they just go through each element of whatever you want to select, stuff that usually has like a same class or same ID, and it lets you manipulate all of them, okay? Like it helps you go through the list and do what you want with them. So we're going to go in and say rating buttons, and we're going to say dot for each parentheses, and then parentheses again. I'm going to put btn in here for button. And I'm going to space and do what's called an arrow function. So we're going to say arrow, so equal sign, greater than sign, and then curly braces. Okay, so now we're in the for each loop. And now we can add our event listener. So let's say btn, which btn is just a placeholder for rating buttons. Okay, it's just a placeholder. You can put anything you want in here. So we'll say btn dot add event listener. And we're going to say click. And then we're going to say rating button clicked is going to be the name of our function. Okay. So that's all we have to do for that. So let's label these. So we'll say submit button event listener. And then move this down. We'll say rating button event listener. Okay, there we go. So those are separate. And now let's go down here and make our function. Say function rating button clicked parentheses. And we're going to use our little e parameter for event again, like we did in our function above here. And now we're going to use an if statement that says if we click on one of these, run the following code. So we're going to say if e.target.classlist.contains rating button. So if we click on an element that contains the class of rating button, we want to do something. So we're going to say, in the parentheses here, we're going to say e.target.classlist.toggle active. Okay. And you can see now we're toggling that class called active. So toggle is just mean like activate, deactivate. So active, done. So every click active, not active. Okay. And again, we're adding this little CSS class that we created here, rating number button dot active. Okay. So active class. So it's just saying, hey, this code is saying, hey, if you're clicking on some element that has a class of rating button, which all of our rating buttons do, and on click, go ahead and add the active class, which is the class that we created here, that changes the color in the background. Okay, so that's working. And now we have to write one more piece of code below there on our JavaScript that takes the text content or the content of what's in the button. So in this case, the content for each button is the number that's in here, and brings it here to where the dynamic number is. Okay. And that little last piece of code is this. It's default score equals e dot target dot text content. And that's it. So default score, instead of being 0, which is what it is, and we just submit with nothing, we're going to actually change it because we made that a let variable. It's changeable. And we're going to change it to say whatever the text content is of whatever button we're clicking, that's our new score. Okay? So 5, 5, 4, 4. See how that's working? 1, 1. All right? So that's it, guys. That's pretty much it for the app. We have all the main functionality here for the rating component app. That's basically it as far as the design goes. Let's just double check. So yeah, that's it. And I guess there's a mobile design, which is just the same thing, guys. If you want to make it mobile, you just got to go in and make your media queries and just make the width of this smaller, and then you should know how to do that. For on a video like this, you should know enough CSS how to make stuff mobile. If not, you can go to any. I have a ton of videos where I make HTML CSS designs from Front End Mentor, and we make it mobile with media queries. You can go check that out. And I'm not going to get into that here. This video is already getting too long, so I don't want to waste time doing that. So that can be your little project. Go ahead and make this mobile if you want. And then another side project you could do is you could, when you submit here, you can make like an X that you can click, and then it'll switch it back to the beginning to where this will be showing again, and then you can submit another score if you want. That could be another little side project you do. But that's it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I know you guys all keep asking me to do a JavaScript video, so here you go. I'm currently making a free JavaScript course that I'm uploading videos to almost daily. So if all of this was super confusing to you, you can go visit that free JavaScript course and go through it, and I'll teach you all the basics here so that maybe this stuff will make more sense. All right, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.